Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Thursday. All of today's guests, including Farhan, standing by, brought to you by Optic Foliar, the only lights-on spray with no damage and no burning to your plant leaves. Plant efficiency, nutrition, and results all combined into a single solution for all stages of growth and safe to use on flowers. Spray it, see it, believe it. That's Optic Foliar. Visit this made in BC company online at opticfoliar.ca. A lot of people ripping into your first segment, energy.
And my energy?
Yeah.
I don't know. Hey, look, Kevin Epp took a lot out of us yesterday. He just, hey, I'm being honest. I got my positivity pills. I'm all ready to go.
What were you up to last night?
Just watching TV.
Huh. I could see why you're tired.
Do you remember Porky's, the movie?
Sure.
Yeah, remember in the 80s?
You watched that last night?
No, it was a good movie, though. You remember that, right?
Did you watch it last night?
No, I didn't watch it last night. It just popped up on my timeline. It's a good movie.
Just for no reason. All right, Farhan Lalji joins us from TSN. Do you remember Porky's, Farhan, by any chance?
It was Canadian.
I do, but I didn't think when I got on this show that'd be what we were talking about.
Yeah, don't.
Porky's.
Yeah.
Canadian movie, by the way.
Porky's and Dollywall's Energy.
Canadian movie, by the way. It was good.
Is it Canadian?
Yeah, it's Canadian.
Okay. Let's move on. Is that okay?
Yeah, go.
Okay, Canucks 6, Senators 2. Farhan, what does this do for the Heat on Benning and Green?
Probably doesn't do a lot, right? If the organization had been going down this road a week ago in terms of looking at potential changes, and based on different reports, they've already been looking at potential head coaches. I don't know that it slows down the train. I think they're going to need to do a little bit more or show a little bit more in the next couple of weeks for that path to be diverted. But I think for the players, it probably does a lot, right? I mean, you had a bunch of guys in the last 2 games that have bumped a slump, right? Brock Besser hasn't, but everybody else seems to have. I mean, big time highlight reel goal by JT Miller, Bo Horvat. We saw the power play shot by Pettersson 2 games ago. So a few of those guys probably feel like a burden has been lifted off their shoulders a little bit. We'll see if they can follow that up with any kind of performances at home. But it's an interesting ownership group, right? They've exercised patience when they shouldn't have. They pulled the trigger early when they shouldn't have. They generally, whatever decision they make is probably one they shouldn't have. What we've seen in terms of these types of large decisions to this point. So we'll see what it'll take to slow them down now.
That's such a great point about the patience shown by the ownership group. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Hey, we had Kevin Epp on the show yesterday, NHL agent. He feels the local media, the Vancouver media, is much too negative, and I'm paraphrasing here, when it comes to covering the Canucks. What's your opinion?
Look, I like Kevin, and Kevin's had some clients that have been at the brunt of it, right? I mean, whether it's a guy like Jake or some of the narrative around Ekman Larson when he first came here, and Kevin's an exceptional agent, and he's going to do what he can to, protect his clients and their interests as any good agent should. That said, I think he's completely wrong. And I say that because is the coverage negative? Sure, but look at the results the last 8 years. Like, how do you, put lipstick on this thing? It's difficult. So, should certain players have been given a little more latitude when they came in? Should certain players have, been treated differently? I think it's hard to make that argument when you look at the fact that this team has been an unmitigated disaster in the current management era. From a communication standpoint to a performance standpoint, like, the record is what it is. That's what's negative. That's what is driving the coverage. And I'll tell you something, guys. The media in this town has changed tenfold since I started covering this team. And really not even like tenfold since they won the cup or went to the cup final, I should say. When you look at just the volume of coverage, it's so different than what it used to be. I mean, think of the Vancouver Province and Sun. They used to have 3 guys each. There were 6 guys covering it between those 2 outlets. Now it's 1 outlet. They've got 1.5 persons covering it. There's not the venom or the volume of coverage there used to be. You go to a Canuck availability, and it's generally, Drancer and myself and J-Pat and maybe Patrick Johnson asking tough questions from time to time. There isn't that volume of people that are there.
Yeah.
It's a lot of younger people, a lot of digital media. On top of that, in the last 2 years, these guys don't have to face a single scrum.
Yes.
Right? Like there's not 20 guys like in your face after a game. It's not like that anymore. So to suggest that it's what it was and to not put around the proper context of this is a results-based business. You think we want to cover trash? We don't want to cover that type of team. We want to cover a team that's successful and relevant. And the narrative fits the results. And you can't walk away from that, right? I mean, teams or players, if they don't want to come here, it can't possibly be because of the coverage. I mean, I would take intense coverage if there was a positive team. Like as a player, if I'm going to go to a team where it's relevant, right? And yeah, there's a passionate fan base and they get covered, right? So I don't know. I mean, if players don't want to come here because of media coverage, that player is probably pretty mentally weak and thin-skinned.
Hey, Farhan, you talk about the old days and the scrums, and you are still
Donnie
part
Taylor
of that.
in a scrum.
Exactly. I did that for a long time, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of pressure on the players. It's changed, but the players might argue and agents might argue that it's more intense now because of social media.
It might be, but like how much of that is the actual media on social media versus Canuck Twitter, right? Like Canuck Twitter is a pretty tough place. There's no doubt about it. And I think that, from a media standpoint, are we creating that or are we responding to it, right? And that's always the question, in a case like this, the chicken or the egg. And I just think that, what's out there in the marketplace is pretty bad, right? And, and the players have a choice as to whether or not you want to isolate yourself from that. So, social media is a tough place. But again, to defend the fans, it's a tough place because this is a bad team and a bad organization right now. And when that changes, I think you're going to see a difference in how the fan base responds to them, right? So, Canuck Twitter's different. And when you talk to other media that are in their own markets that can or can't be hostile, they'll even point to the fact that, Canuck Twitter's pretty tough. But at the same time, this has been a patient marketplace. And when you look at what they were dealing with before, and there was a lot of success in the early part of the decade, and then all of a sudden you go to the final in 2011, and in 2014 you're making changes. And from 2014 to now, other than a blip in the bubble, what have we seen, right? So you have to look at the bubble in context and say that was the exception, not the norm. And you've got to grade it based on what we've seen for 8 years, and it just hasn't been successful. So to defend the fans on Twitter, I don't blame them.
Look, they just beat the two worst teams in the NHL. That's great, but they got some big, tough games coming up. And Pettersson is averaging 13 minutes of ice in the last 5 games. He's playing with Dowling and Podkolzin. Look, the Pittsburgh Penguins are coming in. There's going to be some big teams. How do you get this guy's minutes up? And the fact that he's supposed to turn it around offensively with Dowling, Farhan, is amazing to me. It's not going to happen.
No, it's not, right? But then you also have to decide how much better is he for the players around him depending on how he's playing, right? If the other two lines start gaining some traction, then you mess that up by putting Pettersson with them because ultimately you need some team results. Now, look, I'm with you, Rick. He needs to get elevated. He needs to play with better players. And I think in the last couple of games, he's shown some signs of life at 5-on-5 play, and I think you're going to see his minutes get elevated. But if you're a head coach, you know Travis better than I do, right? What cards do you have to play with a superstar player? You can't sit him on the bench, right? So they've tried to do a lot of different things with him, and whether he's on the first power play unit or not, he's been on and off that, and whether you're on and off the top line. I mean, the lotto line just wasn't working, right? So you've got to look at some different options, and one of them has been JT Miller in the middle. And so I think you do have to look at it from a team standpoint. Do I think it's sustainable to allow him to function in that role with the guys he's playing with? No, I don't. And I think it's going to change, but I'm not blaming Travis Green for having done it these last few games because as a head coach, you just don't have enough cards to play, and sometimes playtime with a star player is the only one.
Farhan, switching gears, football, CFL Division semifinals Sunday, Saskatchewan at Winnipeg, Hamilton at Toronto. Fine, but I want you to explain this for me. Everybody talks about the CFL and how it's not what it used to be, all of that. Okay, fine. You look in the stands, and maybe you would agree with that. But Saskatchewan at Calgary in overtime over the weekend. Over 1 million viewers on TSN. Montreal at Hamilton. Close to 700,000 viewers on TSN. Numbers that every television program, including this one, certainly would kill for. How do you explain that with what we see in the stands and the general opinion of the future of the Canadian Football League?
Yeah, I think that all of it is real, right? Like the joke is for us that, there's a lot of CFL fans in Toronto, just no one's willing to admit they're a CFL fan. And I think they're out there, but I also think that they've got to do more for the on-field product to have people go from a casual observer on television to get into the stadiums, right? That's the biggest thing. And we know they've got to get younger. I mean, even the traditional marketplaces like Edmonton, when they talked about their demographics at the end of the season, when they made a bunch of changes, they talked about needing to get younger. And those things need to happen, because when you look at those television numbers, while they're fabulous, when you look at the numbers in and around, males between 19 and 49 or whatever the classic demo number is, there's a ways to go there, right? So I think it's a multi-layered thing, but just getting people to watch the game on television right now, I think will help them next year, because it's a long-term comeback coming out of COVID. And you look at the product this season, and that Calgary game against Saskatchewan is reflective of it. The product hasn't been good this year, guys, right? Like the quarterback play, the quality of game, it hasn't been as good. And you look at that game, the first half was a tragedy.
Yep.
The second half in overtime was fantastic, right? So they need to string a few more performances like that together and finish the season off strong so that they can get fans back in the stands next season.
Okay, one more thing, Farhan. Nice shirt.
Yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
Good choice.
I wasn't wearing it just that much earlier.
We know.
Would it kill you to have a Donnie and Dolly 8x10 in the background?
Yeah,
a logo. You could have had a logo or something in there.
We'll send it.
I'll tell you what, if Henderson sends me one, I'll put it up just for these hits.
Thanks, Farhan. Appreciate it.
Get rid of the football.
I'll replace Mary in the corner with the Donnie and Dolly logo. Would that be okay?
Oh, she'd be all for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just Google it. You can find it.
Thanks, Farhan.
Thanks, guys.